to take some questions, comments, disagreements, feelings, reactions. Yes, please, will you stand up and say who you are?
Kathy Brown from GSSW.
Hi.
Do I have to? Okay. I really appreciated your comments about the importance of bringing body into teaching, and I was just curious, how do you connect that to people who are disabled or not able-bodied?
So there's all kinds of people in my classes. So we find all kinds of ways to relate to each other. And what happens is the students come up with whatever we need to do to make that happen. Yeah, and the body isn't only about physical movement, but it's about being able to express yourself in all kinds of ways. So it can be hand gestures, it can be what you do with your eyes. I think about, for example, my friend Nahum Cohen, who's an Israeli stonemason, and he's blind. There's a way that there is knowledge that he has that comes through in his poetic way of speaking that is truly embodied. So I'm talking about embodiment not as body image, but I'm talking about it as body consciousness, which is from Marx, and that's it's in a whole nother place. Does that get to it at all?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. How do you do that in your classrooms?
I'm not a teacher. I don't have a classroom management style.
Anybody else? How do you do that? Yes.
I have people check in with how their body's feeling, what's happening in the moment, sensation. Yeah.
Right. Peggy.
I want to thank you so much for contrasting the way you used to teach with the way you now teach. So perfect for this conference on pedagogy, and I would like to ask you, how did you come to see that you had been doing work that was too in your face and was creating resistance through your methods? How did you come to see that problem?
Well, I think some of it has been having to do the deep work of my own life. You know, my son came to me when he was 8, and then when he was 13, he went back to live with his biological mother. And I was just knocked to my knees. And there was also a tremendous amount of trauma that came to me very, very young. Pretty much everything you could kind of have happen. My own contemplative practice, I think, particularly the yoga and the therapy, moved me to a place of humility. And then it was, what do I need to do to help nurture that same humility in the classroom? And you know, a lot of the contemplative stuff I did, I didn't tell people that I was doing it because I was really afraid that they would, I don't know, all my fears. I was afraid I would be called touchy-feely from California. I was afraid that people would accuse me of bringing church into it, which that's not, you know. I was afraid that I was just full of fear. But then I started to, so many people I admired use contemplative practices. I mean, I was introduced by Dr. Reverend Katie Cannon, who was the first African-American woman tenure track at Episcopal Divinity School. She did the naming ritual. Naming ritual is where you start every class with people saying what their names are and where they come from and what their names mean and how they feel about their names and their genealogy. And then everybody does their names, and we always sit in a circle. She did it with 80 people, so I think she can do it with 80 people at Episcopal Divinity School, you know. And then, you know, I learned the energy circle from Brenda Dixon Godshield, this African-American woman, professor emeritus of dance at Temple. And she's sitting up there at an American Studies conference, of all places, actually getting the academics to stand in an energy circle and talk about how they really felt about the play that she did with her husband about interracial loving. Right? And I think if she could do that at American Studies, you know. So some of this was also really, I learned contemplative practices first from Maurice Stein, who's a self-defined Jew-boo. But then a multiracial group of people, particularly Native scholars, kept introducing me, and that is like all that came together to start to think about, well, how do I need to think about myself differently in the classroom?
And it sounds to me also as though these practices are tender and helped you understand you needed that tenderness and you wanted it for your students.
Yeah. And I don't mean that tenderness is a way to get people off the hook in any way. I'm not sure if I'm articulate about how do we hold people accountable while creating tenderness, but I think it's possible. I don't think it's a false dichotomy.